This is the Gauntlet Podcast. My name is Jason. I am joined by my co-host, Lowell Francis. Hi, Lowell.
Hey, Jason. How are you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. Listeners, this is our monthly Gauntlet Hangouts Roundup, and this month for the Roundup, we are joined by community member and Rockstar GM, Tyler.
Nice.
Hey, Tyler, welcome to the Gauntlet Podcast.
Hi there. Thank you very much.
So, listeners, we are going to talk about some of the games that we played in April, and then we are going to look ahead and highlight some games on the May calendar for Gauntlet Hangouts, and then we're going to wrap up, as always, with Giving Me Life. Lowell, why don't you kick us off? How was your April?
It was pretty good. So, off Gauntlet, continuing on running Blades in the Dark, our action cards game, 13th Age, and we also played Fellowship. And then on Gauntlet, finished out Apocalypse World with Rich, his Star Wars Apocalypse World. I started Blades in the Dark with the Aruvia playset. We did 7th Sea Crescent Empire, and also Coriolis, The Third Horizon.
All three of those games share something in common.
Yeah, and it had been a very deliberate attempt on my part to do a series of games that were working from those Middle Eastern themes. Because I was very curious about how these different games did that. My background, very long time ago in college, is in Middle Eastern studies and anthropology. And I lived in the Middle East, in Egypt for a year. And much like David Lafreniere and Christo Meade also have...
I was about to say, yeah, that's David's background too, yeah.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. So I had these three different games that do different things with it, and I wanted to run them parallel to look at it and maximize my resource and planning so I could read lots of stuff. So I want to talk a little bit about what that means, and then a system thing after that. So 7th Sea, of course, is John Wick's Renaissance Pirates game. It has its own version of Earth called Thea, and that's very much a shifted, gameable version of Europe. It's like Europe, but it's not. It shares some of the history, smooths off the roughest edges while it still keeps the grit. It allows you to play without needing to know the history. It kind of dummies it down, and it moves things around so that they are easier to get to and easier connected for the gameplay. And this source book, Crescent Empire, does that for the Middle East in a very interesting way, and not a way I've seen other games that have treated Middle Eastern or Arab or Islamic themes do before. It has all the different cultures there. So we've got a place that's Persian. We've got a place that's a Levant. We've got a place that's closer to the classic Abbasids. It's very interesting. Rather than being a monolithic pseudo-Islam straight out of the Arabian Nights, it has very different cultures. There are very different faiths. It has a version of Islam that's in there, but it also has different faiths. There is a whole Jewish analog there in the Holy Land, the Yachidi. It's really neat. And I think it's a very well done book in that it feels like it's from inside that world. Like it takes it seriously and presents it like, hey, you're going to want to play here. Rather than, okay, here's a cool place you get to go and look at.
Yeah, I like it when setting books do that. When they take cultures that we may or may not be familiar with, but are nevertheless real-world cultures, and they sort of, I don't know if pastiche is the right word, but like they basically, you can see the influences, but they're not trying to do like Tom likes to say on Fear of a Black Dragon, they're not doing Japan land and Thailand land and China land, right? It's like the influencers are there, the flavor is there, but it's not like super appropriative, I guess.
Right. Appropriation. But we'll come back to that point. And this does dovetail into some of the stuff you've talked about on Fear of Black Dragon recently with the Yun Sun episodes and the Kuei Long episodes and so on. So that's one that's very seriously, I mean, it really wants to model the Middle East, and I think it's done well, and it's done with authors who know the culture, and it's done with POC authors in the mix as well. Blades in the Dark, the Aruvia setting is from the special edition, and it's a set of material for an alternate city in another place in that world, and Aruvia is a Persian-flavored setting. Pretty much just kind of color and names and a little bit of flavor. and the city feels very different because it's very different from Duskfall. There are some premises about the cosmology that are at work there. Johnstone Metzger did a series of playbooks that we've been using that are fan-made, and they more fully lean into being Middle Eastern flavored rather than just being names attached. They've got more depth to them, but it's still very much closer to how Yoon Soon treats things. I think we've got the idea, we've got the flavor, but it's its own beast.
Well, Johnstone also did those. What's that game that he did? I'm in the middle of it right now, reading it. The Nightmare Underneath.
Oh, I haven't read that yet.
Yeah, it's a sort of, I guess, kind of an OSR system is the best way of describing it. But it has like lots of like clear, sort of like Eastern influences with it too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was very suspicious at first because, of course, Metzger had done those Dungeon World playbooks that had the Asian names on them that, in fact, were just renames as a joke.
Right, like the ninja was just the thief, right?
Yes, exactly. So I wasn't sure, but no, these are very well done, and I recommend them to anybody who's running Blades in the Dark to go and check these out.
Well, so we should probably mention, just to be fair to Johnstone, with those Dungeon World playbooks, his intention there was to show that like you don't actually have to have different skins, right, to do the sorts of things that a ninja or a samurai would do, right? That the as written playbooks like work just as fine, right? So.
Yeah, that you don't need to go crazy with the hacking of things, and that the game is flexible.
Precisely, right? Yeah.
But yeah, Aruvia is neat. It's done with a lighter hand than Duskfall, and it wears those Middle Eastern themes very, very lightly.
Does it like address Middle Eastern religion? Is religion brought in, especially considering that John Harper has a pretty extensive cosmology already established?
Yeah, Aruvia is interesting. As I mentioned, 7th Sea, Crescent Empire, has its own version of Islam. There's nothing like that here. In fact, there's a very different cosmology in that they don't use ghosts, that there's a fire that burns at the center of the city, and there are these frozen demon princes, and the 4 noble houses are each associated with one of them, and they're sort of forgotten gods. I mean, there's that stuff, but no defining faith, which is always weird to see removed from that kind of cultural context, because I think that is so important. But it works in the context of this. Though I will say, the Aruvia does make you go, wait, so how does this work in this world with like plants and photosynthesis and all kinds of things? It shows some of the gaps of how the world works that I don't quite understand, that I try to lean away from. I don't explain, and I don't ever want to have to explain them. So, so the last game is the game I kind of want to talk about a little bit more, and that is Coriolis: The Third Horizon. I ran it before for the Gauntlet Hangouts when we had just the quick start of it. And this is, quote unquote, from them, Arabian Nights in Space. And it is done by the same people who do Near Zero, which is one of my favorite games. And of course, Tales from the Loop. And I like their basic system. They use this again. And it's a spacefaring civilization that has all of these Arabian trappings to it. If you've ever seen Fading Suns, how Fading Suns does space but with high medieval, this is doing the same sort of thing with sort of Arabian trappings. And it has some really good elements to it, like the fact that there's sort of a decentralized authority. There's not a monolithic nobility, which is reflective of some of the dispersals within the society in the early days of the Islamic empires. There's a struggle between modernity and classical elements, which I really like. There's a lot of good stuff there. But how do I put this? It doesn't have Islam. There's no Islam. Instead, we've got this polytheistic faith of the icons. And I'm not sure how well that works as a substitute for Islam. There's so much about how that religion shapes the culture that, at least for me, leaves some really open questions. And, you know, there's a thing when we talk about Orientalism and sort of co-opting of other people's cultures about seeing the exotic and just focusing on that and focusing on the other. And the culture is well done, but there's a lot of this that feels like trappings and bells and whistles rather than a real engagement. And when you look at the list of authors for this, it's very clear it's all Northern European people. No, I mean, maybe they have some POC people, but at least judging by the names, it doesn't feel like they made any contact with that. But I still like the game. I still like the setting. It appeals to me. And I think with a deft hand, you can avoid some of those simplifications and you can really embrace the cultural elements and make them feel interesting. And it is nice that we just have this culture. We don't have them as a separate outsider thing. We're in that culture itself. But let me move from that Orientalist thing, which I don't know if I'm a great judge. It's been years since I've dealt with critical theory. Again, Tom has a better handle of that than I do.
He did a really nice job on Fear of a Black Dragon, I thought.
Yeah. And that's worth talking about. So one of the things that happens in Coriolis and Seventh Sea is this idea of GM currencies. The idea that things the players do generate a currency that the GM gets to spend. And Cypher has something like that where it has the GM intrusions and the GM pays the players XP. And then 2D20, the Conan and Star Trek has it where you're generating these Doom points that the GM gets to spend. And a lot of those are player choice in 7th Sea and Coriolis and 2D20. It's all about the players taking risks or pushing or wanting more, and that gives the GM this currency. And I wasn't sure if I was going to like that because in a lot of these games, they're very granular about what you can spend on.
Right, yeah.
But what I ended up doing was I kind of stopped looking at those charts, and essentially I used those points to do hard and soft moves. And
good, yeah.
That's what it's been for me, is those are pools of currencies that I spend and I keep in the player's face. So I have a tracker, I have a line, and they know how many points they've generated. And then when I spend them and don't say anything, they know that shit's about to happen. And that foreshadowing, which PBTA really wants you to telegraph future badness, those points really allow you to do that. And I really like that. Now, mind you, 7th Sea doesn't really do that. Really, the points are only to give the bad guys bonuses. And even Coriolis, it's about activating powers and stuff. But I've kind of raised it up a level, and I really like it. It's worked. It's been superbly fun to see the player reaction to it.
That's super smart. I'll tell you what this reminds me of. You know, I was always just kind of like indifferent or agnostic to this idea of like a GM currency, a Doom pool, right? Mm-hmm. Except for a few years ago, I played, or I should say I ran, Tremulous. Do you remember Tremulous?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. PBTA Lovecraftian mystery game. That's a game that has a lot of flaws, if I'm being honest. But one of the things that it does do that I think is super interesting is the GM moves can be taken as hold. Mm-hmm. And then you can spend the hold to do your GM move later, right? And I found that to be super helpful because the situations were often like such that a really big, hard move didn't make a lot of sense given what was going on in the fiction, right? Especially a Lovecraftian thing where you want more of a build. And having the hold, or having it as a currency, like your GM moves as a currency, allowed me to sort of control the pace of the narrative. It allowed me to sort of reveal things at moments when it really felt good. And I always told the players, oh, I'm spending that hold right now, right? Yeah. So they also got that kind of like, oh yeah, something bad's going to happen later, right? Because of this. So yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of the idea of the Doom pool. And I like what you did with it there, Lowell, like taking it away from just the purely mechanical.
Yeah. The thing you're saying is interesting because that's a adding a structure onto a PBTA game, which is loose structure. Whereas with these leaning trad dindle games like Coriolis and 7th Sea, I'm using it to move more to the PBTA side to kind of open that up.
Right.
And give the players some autonomy there. And it helps me because I don't feel like I'm just throwing stuff at them. they're generating stuff, and then they're giving them an excuse to bring that stuff to bear.
Sometimes with games like that, it's hard to actually get the currency flowing. I've had games where they just weren't giving out those points. So were you able to keep it moving and keep it running?
Oh yeah, because I have the secret weapon of the player's ego, and I will push them consistently on this. Oh, really? You want to do that? You're losing money not doing this. And I can get them to generate that pool and get them to cringe about generating that pool. So, yeah.
Nice.
It's a GM skill worth developing. The skill of getting players to want to act against the interest of their characters.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Playing into their ego.
Oh, yeah. I like when I'm playing like Dungeon World or something like that, or when I'm running with Dungeon World or Wodu, I love the GM move. Show them it's like show them something valuable, but at a cost or something like that. You kind of just lay it out there like, oh, are you sure you don't want to go investigate that body over there? Because like there's a sack of silver that's spilled out next to it. Right? Yeah. That kind of thing.
And you did okay. So you look fine doing that, Fraser. I mean, you could look. You could maybe re-roll and maybe look badass if you went
you
for
could
that.
be halo jumping out of the ship or whatever. Right?
Exactly. That's how you work them. The last thing I want to say about that is, I kind of like Fate, but the economy of the GM Fate points and player Fate points, sometimes I don't, because it does require you to push really hard to get those and the players to push hard. These are mechanics that don't require that kind of push. It folds in easily. And so I've ended up liking that more this way that it works than I have in Fate, despite being a booster for Fate. And so I think Coriolis is really good. I think there's some concerning aspects to it, but I think in the hands of somebody who is aware of the problematic nature of it, it's a very cool setting. It's got a lot of great pieces to it, especially if you ignore the granularity and you run the combat smoother and hand wave some of the systems. Paul Beakley has talked about, I think we've talked with Fraser about Coriolis being super deadly and really burn out of the players, because he's ruling it kind of rules as written, whereas I'm like, okay, let's not roll for every portal jump.
Right. Yeah,
and let's not have you spend all your money on each portal jump, because we want to go to another planet. That's where the fun is. So good stuff there. I like it, and it's been a fun month.
Awesome. I was going to just throw in real quickly that I'm of the opinion that it's okay to play with something that has problematic stuff in it, as long as you're kind of upfront about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like as long as you acknowledge it at the table, I think like that's, I mean, to some degree, that's kind of the best you can do in a lot of cases. I am not of the opinion that it's worth completely rejecting art because of its problematic content.
All right. Something like playing the, 1001 Nights type game. There are elements that could be problematic, but that's such a wonderful thing to try and delve into.
Right. There are games that, for me, go a little too far. There was a recent Kickstarter that bugged me immensely, and people really loved it.
I mean, I'm not going to run Fatal.
Yeah. Well, actually, here's another interesting bit, another side note. One of the disadvantages that's set for the pilot archetype is alcoholism. And Christo took that for his character. And we kind of joked about the first session, but he stopped off the second session to say, look, I want everybody to realize that we're making this the character trait, but alcoholism is a serious thing. And we recognize that is, and we are playing it in the context of a dramatic situation, because both he and I have contacts and family that have been involved in that situation. So I think if you're willing to acknowledge it and talk about it, I think you can handle that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Tyler, please tell us, how did your April go?
I had a really good April. I had wonderful games I got to play. Off Gauntlet, I did Mistborn, I did Fellowship, World of Darkness, Dungeon World. And then on Gauntlet, I'm running World of Dungeons, the Blood and the Chocolate module. I played Good Society, the fictionalized memoirs of Harriet Wilson and her sisters, Home by Dark, Tall Pines, Perseverant, Final Girl, the Game of Love.
Oh, how was that?
It was a lot of fun. Lauren is just marvelous. It was a lot of fun. And kind of in that list, you'll see there are a lot of GM-less games that I ended up playing. And things like that, Memoirs of Harriet Wilson, and I played some, Mikhail Tesfer has been running a series on Wednesday that is all GM-less, and I have kind of a love-hate relationship with GM-less games, in that a lot of times it feels like they become aimless or directionless. And we've, going through a bunch of them here lately, I've seen that rise and fall. Some very, very good ones. Some that are so player dependent. There's a lot that you're asking of a player.
Mm-hmm. Player skill, regrettably, tends to be a major factor in whether a lot of GM-less games work, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Like I played a wonderful session of Witch Road to Lindisfarne, which is very, very interesting, and I had great players, but I wondered how it would play with some folks that just aren't, into that immediate improv that's required in these games. But one in particular I did play was Tall Pines, which Mikhail facilitated, and it was marvelous. First off, Mikhail went above and beyond to make a Roll20 page that he had brought all the cards in, had them double-sided, and just a beautiful design he made for that Roll20 page. But along with that, the game itself does a lot of what I want, in that it had a structure. And structure gives that support to the players so that you know where you're going. It has a mechanic where you're going through 3 acts. In a kind of Final Girl style, we all have a central cast. We all have possession of them. There is no agency of just one person controlling that character. But along with that, you're keeping certain cards in your hand, which are the plot cards. And every time you set up a scene, you start with a plot card. You have a limited number. You have the ability to get more. But that limited number means that these scenes in the acts are going to have a structure to begin with. Beneath them, they also have a suit. There are 3 suits in the game. And those suits, depending on how they match up on the board, with character having a suit, the plot having a suit, and then other people can add in plot points to the scene. And how those add up together then open up another card you have in your hand, which is your secret. And again, he did a marvelous job of, we could see the side to, everyone knew what suits would activate a secret, but no one knew what anyone's secret was until it was activated. It also has a mechanic of inspiration cards, which everyone can draw from, and during the course of a scene, first person who lays their plot will frame it. They will ask who wants to be in it, and they will bring their own character in. But during the course of it, someone can bring in a plot point from their hand and reframe that scene.
Cool.
And you can also pull from those inspiration cards, which are all just pictures. They have no text. They're simply pictures. Bring those into the scene and describe why that's been introduced to that scene, either as a plot point or a new character coming in or a situation that suddenly develops. And by doing that, it gave us a real structure to how those scenes were working, kept everyone involved in them, and you felt like while you were improvising your way through it, something was there to support you.
That's fantastic. It's a super sharp insight, this idea that structure is very important for GM-less games. It's incredibly important in GM-less games. I would also add, I think that inspiration, or things to inspire your play, is also super important in a GM-less game. One of the difficulties of playing a GM-less game that's very, very focused on a particular genre is if you have other players at the table who aren't familiar with that genre, you're going to end up with, like you said, a lot of directionless play, or just a lot of floundering. My initial drafts of a game that I have basically abandoned at this point, but I was working on for a while, Public Access, one of the problems I ran into it early on was I understood this inspiration, the Appendix N, really, really well, right? Mm-hmm. I knew how a cheesy Public Access show should look. I understood the creepypasta stories that inspired the game. I'd read them all. And I was running into the problem of if you're not into those things, it's hard to frame up scenes about it, right? And so I did that. I worked in more inspiration. I worked in more structure, and I got to a better place with it. For Tall Pines, is particularly important, right? Because it's attempting to evoke, like Twin Peaks and David Lynch, right?
Exactly.
And those are very, very specific feelings, right? And
it does a very good job of that. And I should mention, I suppose that's it's Miles Gaborit who made the game, and he has clearly, really immersed himself in that, that David Lynch style. Because a lot of what these plots were nicely open-ended. It wasn't like it was telling you what the plot was going to be. It was there to inspire you. And that was really important to it. And then, as I say, you go through these acts, and as you reach the end of an act, depending on which of these suits were played, gives you a listing of how that act ends. And so you have the little bit of structure there to make a scene for how each act ends, and then in the finale part, those suits will once again come into play to, give you one of the three suits as an inspiration.
I think what's interesting about that whole idea of structure is, some people look at indie games and GM-less games and they go, oh, they're loosey-goosey. When in fact, they have structures to them. But
unless they're Fiasco.
Yeah. Some games, though, GM-less games, I've had players dislike where they appreciate the structure and they appreciate the play, but there's a set of high procedural moments, like Questlandia has these procedural moments that just stop everything dead in their tracks.
Right.
There's very interesting stuff that's generated, but it requires going through those procedures. It's
got a lot of dice overhang, for sure.
Yeah. But one of my absolute favorite games, top 5, is Kingdom. But Kingdom has these procedural moments after each scene where you have to check in on several different things that are killer. And I have to, when I run it, even though it's GM-less, I make sure to move through that as quickly as possible and shorthand that as much as possible. Because there's so much other good stuff there, but that particular architecture, that particular set of procedures just kills the flow dead. And I think the best games, like what you're talking about, Tall Pines, have a structure, have procedures, but they move naturally. They feel and they flow naturally. Like Before the Storm is a game that I think has a lot of procedural bits, but it rolls.
Well, and I actually think that, Tyler, you mentioned Witch, the Road to Lindisfarne is a game that is kind of improv heavy and may be difficult if you have players who aren't good at it. But I actually think that Witch does a pretty good job on these axes that we've defined, which is you're literally moving in a direction, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Like you are moving in a direction. And I think the questions and I think the flavor prompts for each of the different acts, I think do quite a bit of lifting as far as what a scene should be about. It's still not easy, and it's definitely not the most structured of GM-less games. But I think it's a general matter, kind of dovetailing off what Lowell said. I do think that part of getting into that nice immersive space that you kind of have to be in for games like this, the less procedure, the better, for sure. I'm also thinking of Fall of Magic, which I think is one of the very best GM-less games there is. And that has, again, it has literal direction in it. And the little scene prompts, the little color prompts are enough to kind of get you going. And they're combined with visual prompts as well, right, in the scroll. So, I don't think you need much to make a GM-less game happen and to kind of give it shape. And there's definitely such a thing as going too far, but you definitely need more than what I think. I think Fiasco's hard. A lot of people always want to introduce Fiasco as the sort of first experience story game or whatever, but I think Fiasco is not easy. I've always been of the opinion that Fiasco is a difficult game to get the right feeling and to kind of just get going,
That's true. And while I spoke of Witch, I think it's on that edge of where I can see.
It is. I think it is. Yeah.
And, there are other games. I think Lovecraft-esque does a really good job, but it has a small structure. Its card play adds a lot to it. I played Durance, which I played with wonderful people, and it had almost nothing to work with and was very hard.
Yeah, I found Durance very difficult too. Basically, Jason Morningstar, all your games are just really hard, so you failed. Sorry.
But in general, I find that, having played these GM games, and like I say, I've always had a real love-hate with them, because I love improving, but I see where it can be difficult for other folks. Tall Pines and a lot of these others that put in that structure, put in something that lets you be inspired. I think that's kind of the secret sauce. I think that will make it accessible to a lot of people.
Cool. Is there anything else you want to say about Tall Pines?
Nope, except that Mikhail ran a heck of a session. It was really wonderful.
Awesome. Well, so my April was pretty good. I played more games than I normally do, actually. I am still in the middle of running World of Dungeons Operation Unfathomable. Operation Unfathomable is the Hydra Cooperative's, one of their newer, I think newest, actually, setting books, which is pretty cool. Listeners, you can hear more about that on Fear of a Black Dragon. It's coming out, it'll be out already by the time this goes out. I got to play 5 sessions of Michael X's Sea of Stars, which is his sort of high romance, high adventure, Star Wars-esque PBTA game. That's going really well. We're having a ton of fun with that. I am running Monster of the Week still. I say still because we're recording this just a little early in the month, listeners, just so you know. But I'm in the middle of Monster of the Week. I ran a 2-part mystery called Huge Problems in Little Shanghai, one of my favorites, and another favorite, The Dream. I played The Final Girl and Cheat Your Own Adventure. Both of those were part of Dia de los Muertos, or normally Halloween special thing that I chose to do in April for some reason. And finally, Sea of Man, which is what I want to talk about. So Sea of Man is part of Jim Pinto's Protocol game series. It's about sailors aboard a small whaling vessel in the 18th century. I want to talk a little bit about Protocol. We have talked about this before in a much earlier episode of the Gauntlet podcast when we talked about one of the Protocol games called Orc Hospital. And I liked Orc Hospital a lot. I liked this not quite as much as Orc Hospital, but I still liked it. The idea behind the Protocol games is, and this is actually kind of a natural pickup to what we were just talking about, it is a GM-less scene framing game, essentially. You use card draws and a set of tables to establish some relationships between the characters that you're playing. Those relationship options on the tables are pretty open to interpretation. Like you can really interpret them, in a really specific way. They're quite, I don't know if sketchy is the right word, but there's a lot of space there. So yeah, you set up your characters. In play, you are using cards and tables again to determine what types of scenes you're going to have. So you get some visual elements for the scene, like what does the scene look like, and then you get some kind of thematic elements as well to draw on. But importantly, you get to play one of several different types of scene type, okay? And I think I got them all. Hopefully I'm not missing one, but there's vignettes, interludes, interrogations, and ensembles. A vignette is a one-player dictated scene. You just quickly narrate your character or whatever character is the star of the vignette doing a thing that matches up with what the cards want you to do. An interlude is a scene between 2 characters, and you have your little scene, again, themed with whatever the card draw has the scene about, and then players who are not in the scene get little drama points. More about drama points in a second. We have interrogations, which is probably the most innovative thing that this game does. It's a really interesting scene where one player is the interrogating player and the other player is the focus, the spotlight player. Their character is the spotlight character. And the interrogating player asks questions of the other player, and the other player answers them in how they narrate the scene. That interrogation can happen in a meta way, like I just ask sort of like in a meta context, or the interrogation can happen in a scene where an NPC is asking, like literally asking the questions of the character. Yeah, so the interrogation scenes are quite interesting. In play, they have a very different feel. Like it's really intriguing, but you can get a lot of really good, like rich storytelling done with it, right? Because you're kind of drilling down on like the very specific motivations and desires of the spotlight character. And then finally, you have the ensemble scene, which is all of the characters, or possibly different NPCs if you choose not to play your own character. So anyway, you have all these different types of scenes, and you just play a certain number of them until the end. And then you do like a little epilogue thing, and then that's it. There's also a currency in play called drama points, I believe. And you can spend those drama points to alter the composition of a scene, introduce NPCs, that kind of thing. Also get redraws on the cards. As far as Sea of Man goes. Now, these protocol games, I should mention, there are like 900 of them or something. Okay, there are like so many protocol games, at least 50 or something. Like there's a bunch.
Much more than that, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. So I am a big fan of whaling fiction. I'm getting some weird looks on the call, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
But, well, from Lowell at least. I love whaling fiction. I will read every book and watch every movie that has to do with whaling vessels. I just love it. Like it's just something that has always appealed to me. I think I was born to be on the sea. I used to be a sailor, right? Like it's just something that really, really appeals to me. And so I understood the tropes of the genre, so to speak, pretty well going into it. And so I think this game largely met my expectations, but not entirely. You know, one thing about the protocol games, at least this one, there is a tendency for the scenes to feel a little samey sometimes because you don't have a huge number of like scene possibilities available. And that works pretty well for certain genres. I've played several of these already, and it doesn't work quite as well in others. And different protocol games switch up the composition of the card tables too. So I'm speaking kind of generally here, like there are definitely distinctions between them, but I found Sea of Man to have kind of a samey feel. It felt like we were always looking out at a sunset or in the hull of the ship talking by lamplight or in port drinking, right? Like those were like the three scenes like that dominated our play, right? And I didn't like the scenes themselves were good. The role play we were doing was really good. I was enjoying it. But afterwards I was like, gosh, it just, most whaling fiction is about strife and storms. Usually they end up stranded at sea and have to eat one another, right? Like that's usually how whaling fiction goes, right? And, Dan was saying afterwards, he's like, well, the sameness to some degree does reflect like the life of a sailor, the life of somebody who's at sea. And I was like, well, actually, yeah, it kind of does. I mean, I used to be a sailor and yeah, there were a lot of days where you were just doing kind of the same thing and looking at the same thing for long stretches of time. So I guess in that sense, it was a success.
I don't think it.
And I'm not trying to be shady here. I mean,
No.
I think that's probably what he was going for, right? Because it definitely has that, like, it's got a repetitive feel to it, right? And so anyway, it's just an observation. Another thing about the protocol games, big picture, and this is something, I've played a bunch of them now at this point, probably at least 7 or 8, and they are not great at a very linear, beat by beat, traditional narrative. They're not good at that. And it's because of how you set up the scenes. Like the way the scenes are set up, sometimes scenes they can't be taking place right after one another, right, in time. Or if they are, or maybe they're taking place after one another, but not like right after one another. So for example, in Sea of Man, you can have a scene where on a calm ocean, probably looking at a sunset, and the next scene, you like run aground. But then the next scene, you're back looking at the sunset on the calm ocean, right? So there's this, and I found all the protocol games have this feeling. It's difficult to do a very, very close linear narrative. And I think that works well in some instances and not as well in other instances. It was great in Orc Hospital because Orc Hospital was trying to emulate like hospital TV show drama combined with just the basic gonzo premise of it being the hospital being run by orcs. And those two things combined, the sort of episodic nature of hospital TV made that structure feel better. It's like you were getting like the whole season of the show rather than a single episode.
Right.
But then I played another one where it was about this really, really intense little family drama out on the prairie during settler days or whatever. And that was less satisfying because we wanted to be able to follow up on the intense AF scene that just took place, right? But like the cards won't let you. So I'm somewhere in the middle on Sea of Man. I can make a case for whether I thought that structure worked for this particular tale or not. Overall, we had a really good time with it, and I think it was a success. But it's, the protocol games, they're doing a real specific thing. And Dan even said, he's like, I think to enjoy the protocol games, you have to just drop the idea that you want to have like a really close, linear, beat by beat narrative.
I think that would kill Sherry.
Would it really?
Yeah, she really likes to have a through line, and she likes problem solving and so on. See, the protocol games, they're on my pile of shame. I backed one of the protocol Kickstarters. I have a ton of them, and I backed the most recent one. That's the fantasy one, but I have yet to play any of these at all.
Give them a shot. I mean, they're definitely doing something different. I think the strength of the protocol games is the different scene types. There is a real pleasure in having these different ways of framing the scenes, because just having the different ways of framing the scenes alters your thinking about the scenes, and alters like your approach to like what you want to accomplish in a scene. And so it's fun. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've always had a good time with these games, but they definitely require a certain approach for sure.
Talking about Sea of Man, I'm also a huge fan of tall ship literature, the Horatio, Hornblower, Ramage style. I'm even thinking of trying to make a game on that style. But where you're talking about the sameness of it and that seeming authentic, do you think, though, that maybe the genre pushes towards the excitement moments being the hit?
I don't know. I mean, I'm very specifically into whaling fiction. not all ship-based fiction, just whaling fiction. And whaling fiction usually has a couple of like big themes. One of them is the sort of like harrowing moment when the ship runs aground, or like, you're lost at sea or whatever. That's a big one. The other theme, and I actually think Sea of Man does a really good job with this theme, is the financial desperation of the sailors. Okay. That's a big, big part of it. This idea of, if we don't catch this whale, if we don't find a whale, we're fucked. We're ruined. And that comes through actually pretty nicely in Sea of Man. A lot of the prompts, a lot of the relationship stuff is revolves around the financial aspect. And so in that sense, I think Jim Pinto really hit it. So I think those are two big themes, really delivered on the financial hardship one, not so much on the, are we going to eat this guy one.
Ravenous.
Indeed. I think that's all I've got to say about it, though. Let's go look at May. All right. Looking ahead at the May calendar, Lowell, what looks good?
So David Rothfeder is running Threadbare. I love Threadbare. I ran it a bunch of times at Gen Con's Games on Demand. The Furry Road 2-hour quick starter is great. There's so much good stuff. It's a PBTA game you should really try. It's got some very cool stuff. You may go, oh, I don't like comedy games. It's not necessarily that. It is dark. It can be super dark, even though it's still got not really combat mechanics in it. It's worth checking out. As of the time of recording this, there was still a seat open in it. So I really, really recommend checking it out.
Awesome. Tyler, what's on your pick list?
Well, I'm really excited that Ryan McNeil is going to be running Alas for the Awful Sea, which, first off, I love Alas for the Awful Sea. It's by Haley Gordon and V. Hedro, who are good Gauntleteer members like us. I like a lot of the things that they make. Alas has a wonderful, moody feel to it. Again, a tall ship's.
Are there whales?
There can be whales, but there can also be mermaids and silkies and yeah. It is a supernatural, moody, kind of dark game, and it has a lovely feel to it. It's very well written. It has a 2-tiered character system, which I think is wonderful. And this is Ryan's first time running for the Gauntlet.
Neat.
He's going to be running in the ASPAC time zone, so that's not accessible to everybody. But there were spots still open. I'm in it. But there are spots still open as of this moment, and Ryan is, first off, a fantastic person and has come into the Gauntlet like gangbusters. He's just really wonderful.
Awesome.
Yeah. The time zone of that one is super tricky for a lot of people, but if you can make it, definitely get into it. Alas is awesome. Ryan was actually in Sea of Man that Dan facilitated that I just talked about, and he's also in another seafaring game that Dan is running this month, and also running Alas for the Awful Sea. I sense a theme. Awesome. The game I'm looking at that I want to highlight is Spelljamming Troika, which is being run by Richard Ruane. He is using the Troika system to run some classic Spelljammer stuff. I know that Spelljammer has a sort of like redheaded stepchild reputation within the 2E AD&D canon.
Possibly well earned, but
not well earned. It's amazing. Spelljammer is awesome.
Very neat. Very neat.
I love Spelljammer, and I don't give a shit what anybody says. Haters can go hate somewhere else. Spelljammer is amazing, and so yeah, I'm super excited he's doing that. Let's go to Giving Me Life. Hello, listeners. I want to take a second to tell you about the newest issue of Codex Moonlight. It features Pack of Strays, The Moonlit Road, an expansion for the Outcast werewolf game Pack of Strays, which was originally featured in Codex Beasts. Moon Language by Aura Bell, a one-player LARP about communicating with the moon through drawing. Under the Gaze of Ear, a supplement of moonlit mystery for Dungeon World. Apocalypse by Moonlight, a plugin for Powered by the Apocalypse games that help you build emergent mysteries. Our newest Gauntlet Daddy, Muscle Bear. 3 dozen truths revealed by the light of the moon. 9 original illustrations, including a fantastic new cover by Claudia Cangini, and a custom layout by Ollie Jeffrey. To get Codex Moonlight, just make a $4 or higher pledge on our Patreon by May 31st. That's patreon.com/gauntlet. Codex back issues are now available on DriveThruRPG. Thanks. All right, it's Giving Me Life. Lowell, what's giving you life?
So, weirdly enough, I saw Rob Donahue posting about a game he picked up called Dusk City Outlaws, and I kind of thought it was a board game. But it turned out it's an RPG, and it's like a lighter version of Blades in the Dark, but the form factor for this is amazing. It's a big box that looks like a big box board game. It's beautifully done. It's got these wonderful character templates in it, character sheets. It's got different cards for quirks and enemies and a lot of procedural stuff. And the rule books are kind of board game rule book size. It's really interesting to look at it. If somebody could do that with like a Harry Potter style game with, even with like PBTA mechanics, it's brilliant, accessible, fun, easy to get into. And the form factor buys into the hype for board games right now in a way that other box sets haven't quite done.
Awesome. Tyler, what's giving you life?
Well, I have a couple of TV shows that I'm really looking forward to. One is on now and one is coming up. The first one, and it kind of stays on theme, is AMC's The Terror.
What's the C thing, isn't it?
It is indeed. It is in the 1840s, the British attempting to find the Northwest Passage, and they do not. And it is a horrible tragedy. All men are lost. This is based on a book by Dan Simmons, who brings in a supernatural element, but the filming is gorgeous. The actors, fantastic people. A lot of Game of Thrones alum in it. They bring in that supernatural factor of Toonbach, a spirit, which, funnily enough, I had run in a Monster of the Week game that had Toonbach in it. But beautiful, moody filming and really a gorgeous show. And the other is The Return of Glow.
Yes.
Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling on Netflix. Such a good show.
I love the first season of Glow. Oh man, it's so good.
It's very good.
I watched I'm sure you saw the commercial for the season 2, the little lip synced commercial. I loved it. Oh, so good.
I was a fan of the original way back, telling my age in the 80s.
Me too.
And so this has it's been really well done. Really, really well done.
I got up at like 6 a.m. every Sunday morning to watch Glow. I loved it. I wanted to be a Glow wrestler. I wanted to be a Glow wrestler. I didn't even care that they were all women. I wanted to be a Glow wrestler. It was all I wanted to do. And I was really disappointed when it occurred to me I couldn't do that as my profession. The thing giving me life is, so I'm working on my game, The Between. I have not talked about it on the show, really. It's coming along, though. It is my kind of Powered by the Apocalypse. I say kind of because it's really closer to World of Dungeons and Blades than it is typical PBTA. But it's my PBTA version of a sort of Penny Dreadful style monster hunting thing. It's Victorian London. It's called The Between because, well, the title works on numerous levels, actually, but the principal level is that it's called The Between because the principal innovation in the game, on the player side at least, is this idea of slowly revealing the character's past. We call it looking through the Janus mask. You can look through the mask of the past or the mask of the future. And whichever you look through, you have to do a particular thing. It's usually narrating some kind of flashback or narrating some kind of scene. And we gradually reveal that past. It's catching up to them. And we're curious, what are they going to choose for the future, right? So it's called The Between because they're kind of in this weird liminal place, right? But anyway, it's coming along great. I'm like really, really happy with how it's shaping up. Every person I've showed it to has given me the identical piece of feedback, which is really good, unprompted, so it makes me happy, of this totally looks like the game you would write. Like every bit of this is Jason as fuck. And so that makes me think I'm on the right track. So yeah, super happy about that.
It's giving me a little life that I'm going to get to play it with.
I know. I'm excited to run it for you. So I think it's going to be a little rough because it does have, I'm discarding a lot of PBTA knowledge, right? Or I should say, or maybe truth in quotes, right? I'm discarding a lot of like what we are meant to think about Powered by the Apocalypse in favor of what I know to be true after playing a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse. I'm substituting my lived, earned experience for truisms, essentially. And so I think it's going to be, it might piss some people off, but I hope at least they'll give it a fair shake. And listeners, that's our show. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can get in touch with me specifically and the Gauntlet generally by going to Twitter and tweeting at us at Gauntlet RPG. We have a website. It's gauntlet-rpg.com. We're on G+. Just go to the community section of G+, and search for the Gauntlet. And we're on Patreon at patreon.com/Gauntlet. Lowell, thanks so much.
Oh, thank you.
Tyler, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you a lot. I had a great time.
And listeners, thanks for listening. Take care.